The void around Earth trembled with the arrival of something unprecedented in galactic history. Space itself seemed to bend and twist as massive wormhole apertures tore open across the solar system's outer reaches. From these swirling portals of twisted space-time emerged the largest armada ever assembled by the Galactic Coalition. Admiral Zektar of the Vorthak Empire stood on the command bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, watching as fleet after fleet materialized in perfect formation. His four arms worked the holographic displays with practiced precision, cataloging the arriving forces. 500 battle fleets. Each fleet contained between 50 to 200 warships, depending on the contributing species. The numbers were staggering even by coalition standards. Status report. Zektar commanded, his voice a low rumble that resonated through the bridge's atmospheric processors. 497 fleets have arrived and assumed positions. Admiral, reported as tactical officer, a crystalline being whose faceted form pulsed with bioluminescent data streams. The Hegemony's 7th Fleet is delayed due to engine malfunctions. The Collective's bioships require additional time to achieve full combat readiness. All other forces report ready for immediate engagement. Zektar's primary eyes focused on the tactical display showing Earth, a small blue-green world that had somehow managed to defy the greatest powers in the galaxy. Around the planet, a sparse collection of human vessels moved in defensive patterns. Perhaps 300 ships total, most of them converted civilian vessels with hastily mounted weapons. It was almost insulting that such a pitiful force had caused the Coalition so much trouble. Remind me again why we need 500 fleets to deal with this primitive backwater, Zektar muttered to his intelligence officer, a tall, gray-skinned Etherian whose large black eyes never seemed to blink. The humans have proven remarkably resourceful, Admiral, the intelligence officer replied carefully. In the past 18 months, they have defeated 3 separate coalition punitive expeditions. The first expedition consisted of 50 ships and was completely destroyed. The second expedition numbered 200 vessels from the Kethmori Navy. Only 17 ships returned, and their crews were found to be suffering from severe psychological trauma. The third expedition, I know about the third expedition, Zektar interrupted harshly. I lost my brother in that disaster. The bridge fell silent. Everyone knew about the third expedition. 3 full battle fleets, 750 of the Coalition's finest warships, had been sent to bring humanity to heel. What returned could barely be called a fleet at all. 73 ships, most of them severely damaged, their crews speaking in terrified whispers about impossible tactics and weapons that defied conventional understanding. The humans had done something unprecedented in galactic history. They had taken on the might of multiple advanced civilizations and won, not through superior technology or overwhelming numbers, but through sheer, inexplicable tenacity and tactical innovation that bordered on the supernatural. The Coalition Council has determined that humanity poses an existential threat to galactic stability, the intelligence officer continued. Their rapid technological advancement, combined with their apparent inability to accept submission, makes them too dangerous to allow continued existence. This force represents the combined military might of 47 Coalition member species. There will be no 4th expedition, Admiral. There will be no survivors. Zektar nodded grimly. He had studied the human conflicts extensively, trying to understand how such a young species had managed to humiliate forces that had conquered star systems before Earth's sun had finished forming. What he found disturbed him more than any conventional military threat. Humans didn't fight like civilized species. They ignored accepted rules of engagement. They used tactics that were considered dishonorable, even by the standards of the most warlike Coalition members. Worse, they seemed to thrive in situations that would break the morale of any sane military force. The more desperate their situation became, the more dangerous they grew. During the Battle of Luna Station, human defenders had continued fighting even after their orbital platform had been breached in 17 places and was venting atmosphere. Instead of surrendering, They had detonated their own fusion reactors in a desperate gambit that had taken out 3 coalition heavy cruisers. The explosion had been visible from Earth's surface. At the siege of New Geneva, human forces had held a mining colony against an entire Keth Mori battle group for 6 months. When coalition forces finally broke through the defenses, they found that the humans had evacuated all civilians through a network of smuggling tunnels that had taken 2 years to construct. The military defenders had stayed behind to buy time, fighting to the last soldier while broadcasting defiant messages on all frequencies. But it was the Battle of the Asteroid Fields that had truly shaken the coalition's confidence. Human forces had used the rocky debris of Shattered Moon as cover, playing a deadly game of hide and seek with pursuing fleets. They had mounted weapons on asteroids, created false bases to waste coalition ammunition, and somehow managed to coordinate attacks across millions of cubic kilometers of space using nothing more than tight beam laser communications. The humans had turned the asteroid field into a death trap that had claimed over 200 coalition vessels. When the surviving coalition forces finally retreated, the humans had sent them a message: "Thanks for the target practice. Come back anytime." "Admiral," the communications officer called out, interrupting Zektar's dark thoughts. "We're receiving a transmission from a human homeworld. It's being broadcast on all frequencies. Put it through." The main display shifted to show a human male wearing what appeared to be a military uniform. He was seated behind a simple desk, and the background showed the blue skies and green hills of Earth. The human looked directly into the camera with an expression of calm determination. "To the coalition forces currently surrounding our system," the human began, his voice steady and clear, "I am Admiral Marcus Chun, Supreme Commander of the United Earth Defense Force. I know why you're here. You've come to finish what your previous expeditions failed to accomplish. You believe that overwhelming numbers will succeed where skill and courage have failed." Zektar felt his mandibles clench involuntarily. The human's tone was not that of a leader facing impossible odds. It was the voice of someone who had already calculated the price of victory and found it acceptable. "I want you to understand something before you begin your attack," Chun continued. "Humanity has spent the last 2 years preparing for this moment. We've studied your tactics, analyzed your technology, and learned from every engagement. We know we're outnumbered. We know we're outgunned. We know that by any reasonable calculation, we cannot win." The human admiral paused, and for a moment, something that might have been a smile crossed his features. "But you've made one critical error in your calculations. You've assumed that we'll fight like you do. You've assumed that we'll follow the rules of civilized warfare. You've assumed that we'll surrender when the situation becomes hopeless." Chun leaned forward slightly, his eyes seeming to look directly at every coalition commander simultaneously. "You don't know us very well." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the coalition bridge in tense silence. "Primitive psychological warfare," Zektar's tactical officer observed, attempting to project confidence in the face of inevitable defeat. "It's a common enough tactic among less developed species." "Perhaps," Zektar replied, but something in the human's words had unsettled him. There had been no bravado in Chen's voice, no desperate bluffing. Just a simple statement of fact delivered with the confidence of someone who knew something his opponents did not. "All fleets report ready, Admiral," the communications officer announced. "Coalition Command requests permission to begin the final assault." Zektar looked at the tactical display one more time. 500 battle fleets arranged in perfect attack formation. Nearly 40,000 ships carrying enough firepower to glass a dozen worlds. Against them stood humanity's pathetic collection of converted freighters and hastily constructed defense platforms. It should have been over in minutes. "Signal all fleets," Zektar commanded. "Operation Final Dawn is authorized. Begin the attack." Across the solar system, engines flared to life as the largest military force in galactic history began its inexorable advance toward Earth. On every coalition ship, crew members checked their weapons and reviewed their orders. This would be the battle that ended the human problem once and for all. None of them noticed the small energy signature that had appeared on the edge of their sensor range. A single ship, ancient by galactic standards, drifting silently in the shadow of a dead asteroid. Its hull bore scars from 1,000 battles, and its weapon systems were obsolete by modern standards. But its crew was very much alive, and they were watching the Coalition advance with professional interest. The ship was the UES Indomitable, and it had been waiting for this moment for a very long time. Captain Sarah Mitchell stood in the center of her ship's cramped bridge, studying the tactical displays with the practiced eye of someone who had spent 30 years fighting impossible odds. Her crew numbered only 47 souls, and their ship was older than some of the Coalition admirals commanding the approaching fleets. By any reasonable measure, they were irrelevant to the coming battle. But reasonable measures had never applied to the Indomitable or its crew. "Captain," her tactical officer reported quietly, "Coalition forces are beginning their final approach. ETA to Earth orbital space, 6 hours. Any sign they've detected us?" "Negative, ma'am. We're running full stealth, and this asteroid field is providing excellent cover. They have no idea we're here." Mitchell nodded. The Indomitable had been stationed here for 3 months, waiting for exactly this scenario. While the Coalition had been massing their forces, Earth's military planners had been preparing their own surprises. The approaching fleets would find humanity more prepared than they could possibly imagine. "Signal from Earth Command, Captain," the communications officer announced. "Admiral Chun sends his compliments and requests that we proceed with Operation Lazarus on schedule." "Acknowledged," Mitchell replied. She looked around at her crew, seeing the familiar mixture of determination and anticipation on their faces. They had volunteered for this mission, knowing full well that they probably wouldn't survive it. But survival had never been the point. "Ladies and gentlemen," Mitchell announced to her crew, "you all know why we're here. The Coalition thinks they can intimidate humanity through overwhelming force. They're about to learn that some things can't be intimidated, some things can't be broken, and some things fight harder when the odds are impossible." She moved to her command chair and activated the ship-wide communication system. "This is Captain Mitchell speaking. In approximately 30 minutes, we will engage the largest enemy fleet in galactic history. Our orders are simple. Make them remember this day for the rest of their lives, however long that might be. We are the Indomitable. We don't surrender. We don't retreat. And we sure as hell don't make it easy." The crew responded with the traditional battle cry that had echoed through the ship's corridors for 3 decades. No quarter asked, none given. As the Coalition fleets continued their advance, confident in their overwhelming superiority, the ancient frigate began to power up systems that hadn't been active since the ship's last refit. Deep in the Indomitable's engine compartments, fusion reactors that had been running on standby began cycling up to full combat power. The final battle for humanity was about to begin, and the Coalition was about to discover that sometimes the smallest pieces on the board could change everything. The Coalition advance proceeded exactly according to plan for the first 4 hours. 500 battle fleets moved through the solar system in perfect formation, their sensors sweeping space for any sign of human resistance. What they found was encouraging from a tactical standpoint and deeply unsettling from a psychological one. Earth's defense fleet was exactly where intelligence reports had predicted, arranged in a thin defensive line around the planet's orbital space. The human ships maintained their positions with disciplined precision, making no attempt to flee or scatter. They simply waited, their weapons powered but not yet targeting the approaching Coalition forces. "It's almost like they want to die honorably," observed Commander Vexhai of the Crystalline Hegemony, speaking to his fellow officers during the regular fleet coordination briefing. "Most species would have at least attempted to evacuate their homeworld or negotiate a surrender by now. Human psychology is aberrant by galactic standards," replied Admiral Korthzen of the Mechanic Collective. "They appear to value concepts like honor and defiance over practical survival considerations. Our xenopsychologists believe this stems from their evolution as persistence hunters on their homeworld. Admiral Zektar listened to the discussion with growing unease. The more he observed human behavior, the less sense it made. Every other species in the galaxy understood the basic calculus of warfare. When facing impossible odds, you surrendered, negotiated, or fled. You didn't arrange your forces in a neat line and wait for annihilation. Perhaps they have some secret weapon, suggested Admiral Thekmore of the Voidstalkers. Some technological surprise that they believe will turn the tide. Our intelligence networks have been monitoring human technological development for months, Zektar replied. They have made impressive advances in several areas, but nothing that could threaten a force of this magnitude. Their most advanced ships are still using fusion drives and kinetic projectile weapons. Primitive by our standards. Then, they're simply delusional, Vexhai concluded. They believe their own propaganda about human superiority. When they see our true strength, they will break. Zektar wasn't convinced, but he kept his doubts to himself. The Coalition had committed too many resources to this operation to allow uncertainty to undermine morale. Whatever the humans were planning, it would be revealed soon enough. Signal from the flagship, his communications officer announced. Coalition Supreme Command is authorizing the commencement of Phase 1. All fleets are to advance to engagement range and demand immediate surrender. Acknowledged, Sektar replied. Signal all fleets advance to Phase 1 positions. Across the solar system, 40,000 ships accelerated toward Earth's orbital space. The human defenders maintained their positions, showing no sign of panic or disorder. If anything, their formations seemed to tighten as the coalition forces approached. At the edge of the asteroid field, Captain Mitchell watched the tactical display with professional interest. The coalition was moving exactly as Earth strategists had predicted. Their formations were textbook examples of conventional fleet tactics. Multiple layers of screening vessels protecting the heavy capital ships, with support elements positioned to provide overlapping fields of fire. They're fighting the last war, her executive officer observed quietly. Standard coalition doctrine, probably unchanged for decades. Good, Mitchell replied. That means our intelligence was accurate. Signal Earth Command. Coalition forces are proceeding according to Plan Alpha. We're go for Lazarus activation. Mom. Mitchell studied the approaching fleets with the eye of someone who had spent years fighting coalition forces. She could identify ship classes and tactical roles at a glance, recognize the subtle differences between the various species' fighting styles, predict their likely responses to different threats. This knowledge had been earned the hard way through bitter experience in dozens of engagements where humanity had been vastly outgunned and outmanned. The Indomitable itself was a testament to that experience. Originally built as a simple patrol frigate, the ship had been extensively modified over years of combat. Her hull bore patches from a dozen different shipyards, and her weapons systems were a hybrid of human engineering and salvaged alien technology. She wasn't fast, she wasn't pretty, and by modern standards, she wasn't even particularly well armed. But she was tough, her crew was experienced, and she had never lost a battle. Coalition forces are entering Phase 1 positions, the tactical officer reported. Lead elements are now within communication range of Earth's defense perimeter. Any response from our forces? Standard acknowledgement signals only, ma'am. Admiral Chun is maintaining radio silence as planned. Mitchell nodded. The opening moves of this battle had been choreographed months in advance. Everything depended on the coalition behaving predictably, and so far they were cooperating perfectly. Contact from the coalition flagship, Earth Communications Center, reported to Admiral Chun. The human commander stood in the heart of the United Earth Defense Forces primary command center, buried deep beneath the Swiss Alps. Around him, dozens of officers monitored displays showing the disposition of forces throughout the solar system. Put them through, Chun ordered. The main display shifted to show Admiral Zektar standing on his command bridge. The alien's 4 arms were folded across his chest in what humans had learned was a gesture of authority among his species. Admiral Chun, Zektar began without preamble. I am Admiral Zektar of the Galactic Coalition Combined Fleet. You are surrounded by 500 battle fleets representing 47 member species of the Galactic Coalition. Your position is hopeless. I am authorized to offer you one final opportunity to surrender unconditionally and spare your world unnecessary destruction. Chun studied the alien admiral for a moment before responding. Admiral Zektar, I appreciate your concern for unnecessary destruction. However, I'm afraid I must decline your generous offer. Earth will not surrender. Then, you choose annihilation, Zektar replied. Very well. You have 1 standard hour to reconsider your position. After that, we will commence bombardment of your world and the destruction of your fleet. I suggest you use that time to make peace with whatever gods your species worships. The transmission ended. Well, Chun said to his staff officers, that was predictably dramatic. Status report. All Earth defense platforms are operational and standing by, reported his tactical coordinator. Fleet elements are in position and maintaining formation discipline. Deep space monitoring stations confirm that coalition forces are proceeding exactly as our projections indicated. Any sign of the special asset, the Indomitable, remains undetected in the asteroid field. Captain Mitchell reports ready to execute on your command. Chun nodded. Everything was proceeding according to plan, but he felt the familiar knot of tension in his stomach that came before major engagements. He had been fighting aliens for the better part of 3 years now, and he had learned that even the best plans rarely survive contact with the enemy. Signal all stations, Chun ordered. Operation Lazarus is authorized. Execute on schedule. Throughout the solar system, hidden installations that had been constructed in absolute secrecy began powering up systems that had never been tested under combat conditions. Deep space monitoring platforms extended sensor arrays that had been disguised as communication equipment. Asteroid mining stations revealed weapons batteries that had been built into their superstructures. Even civilian shipping lanes suddenly bristled with concealed defensive emplacements. Earth's defenders had spent 2 years preparing for this moment, and they had not been idle. Admiral, Zektar's sensor operator called out with obvious confusion in his voice. I'm detecting unusual energy readings throughout the system. Multiple sources, coordinated activation patterns. Explain, Zektar demanded. It appears the humans have concealed defensive installations throughout their solar system. Passive sensors are detecting, at least by the void, Admiral, there are hundreds of them. How did our intelligence networks miss this? Zektar felt the first stirring of genuine concern. What kind of installations? Weapons platforms, sensor arrays, communication nodes. They're integrated into civilian infrastructure, mining operations, even asteroid habitats. Admiral, the entire solar system appears to be one massive defensive network. Before Zektar could respond, his communications officer interrupted with urgent news. Admiral, we're receiving priority signals from advanced scout elements. They report human vessels are beginning to maneuver, breaking defensive formation. On the tactical display, the thin line of human ships around Earth was indeed beginning to move. But instead of fleeing or attacking, they were performing something that looked like a coordinated dance. Ships that had been stationary for hours suddenly accelerated in seemingly random directions, their courses intersecting and diverging in patterns that made no immediate sense. What are they doing? Demanded Admiral Vexhai over the fleet coordination channel. Unknown, Zektar replied grimly. But I suspect we're about to find out. The answer came from an unexpected direction. Deep in the asteroid field, the Indomitable completed its final systems checks and prepared to announce its presence to the galaxy. All stations report ready, Captain Mitchell's executive officer announced. Engines at full power, weapons hot, stealth systems disengaging on your command. Mitchell looked around her bridge one final time. Her crew was small, her ship was old, and they were about to engage an enemy force that outnumbered them roughly 1,000 to 1. By any reasonable calculation, they were about to commit suicide. You know, she said to her crew, When I was a little girl, my grandfather used to tell me stories about the old Earth wars, about battles where tiny forces held off massive armies through sheer determination and tactical innovation. David and Goliath, Thermopylae, the Alamo. I always wondered what it would feel like to be part of something like that. She settled into her command chair and activated the ship's battle alert system. Well, people, I guess we're about to find out. All stations, this is the captain. Battle stations. Stealth systems to standby. Prepare to execute Lazarus Protocol on my mark. Throughout the ship, her crew moved to their positions with practiced efficiency. They had drilled this scenario dozens of times, but they all knew that no amount of training could fully prepare them for what they were about to attempt. Captain, the tactical officer reported, Coalition advance elements are now within optimal engagement range. All hidden installations report ready for coordinated activation. Communications? Standing by for a fleet coordination signal, ma'am. Weapons? All systems armed and ready. Target acquisition locked on lead coalition elements. Mitchell took a deep breath. Once she gave the next order, there would be no turning back. The Indomitable would reveal herself to the enemy, and the largest space battle in human history would begin in earnest. Signal all Earth forces she commanded. This is Indomitable. Lazarus Protocol is now active. All units, prepare to show these aliens what happens when you threaten humanity. She paused for a moment, thinking of her grandfather's stories and the long tradition of humans who had stood against impossible odds. Execute. The ancient frigate dropped her stealth systems and lit up every sensor in the solar system like a supernova. The moment the Indomitable dropped her stealth systems, the entire character of the battle changed. What had been a predictable advance by overwhelming forces suddenly became chaos as coalition sensors registered something that should have been impossible. Admiral, Zektar's sensor operator called out in barely controlled panic. That frigate, its energy signature is off the charts. Its power output is reading at levels consistent with a heavy battlecruiser, not a patrol vessel. On the main tactical display, the Indomitable appeared as a bright red contact that pulsed with energy readings that made no sense. The ship was clearly ancient, her hull scarred by decades of combat, but her power signature suggested weapons and systems that far exceeded anything in the Coalition's intelligence files. How is that possible? Sektar demanded. Run a full-spectrum analysis. I want to know what we're looking at. But before his crew could complete their scans, the rest of the Lazarus Protocol activated across the solar system. Hundreds of concealed installations suddenly came online, revealing themselves to be far more than simple mining operations or communication relays. Asteroid bases ambal massive particle canoneras. Orbital platforms, extended weapon systems that had been cleverly disguised as solar collection panels. Even civilian space stations revealed hidden missile batteries and defensive grids. Admiral, the tactical officer reported with obvious strain, we're detecting over 800 active military installations throughout the system. Power readings suggest a total defensive capability approximately equivalent to "this cannot be correct." Report. Sektar snarled. According to our sensors, Admiral, the humans have constructed defensive installations with a combined firepower equivalent to roughly 200 coalition battle fleets. The bridge fell silent. The implications of what they were seeing challenged everything the coalition thought they knew about human capabilities. Impossible, Admiral Vexhai's voice crackled over the fleet communication system. Human industrial capacity cannot support that level of military construction. Our economic analysts have been monitoring their output for months. Then, our analysts were wrong, replied Admiral Korthsen grimly. The question now is, what do we do about it? Before anyone could answer, the Indomitable provided a demonstration of exactly what the coalition was facing. Captain Mitchell stood at her command station, watching as targeting data flowed across her displays. The Lazarus Protocol had revealed not just hidden installations, but a completely integrated defense network that had been built over 2 years of frantic preparation. Every mine, every station, every seemingly innocent piece of space infrastructure was connected through quantum communication links that allowed for unprecedented coordination. Target acquisition complete, her weapons officer reported. We have firing solutions on lead coalition elements. Signal from Earth Command, the communications officer added. Admiral Chen sends. Show them what the Indomitable can do. Mitchell smiled grimly. The Indomitable had been extensively modified for this mission, her ancient hull packed with experimental weapon systems and power generation technology that pushed the boundaries of human engineering. She was no longer just a frigate. She was a prototype for an entirely new class of warship. All weapons, Mitchell commanded. Fire. The ancient frigate erupted in a display of firepower that stunned both sides of the conflict. Particle beams that belonged on ships 10 times her size lanced out from concealed weapon ports. Missile tubes that had been built into her superstructure launched salvos of fusion-tipped projectiles. Most spectacular of all, her main gun, a weapon that had been salvaged from a destroyed coalition battleship and rebuilt with human modifications, fired a concentrated plasma beam that could punch through the armor of any ship in space. The target of this devastating barrage was the lead element of the coalition advance, a squadron of heavy cruisers for the Vorthak Empire. The aliens had barely begun to register the Indomitable's presence when her weapons struck home. The first cruiser simply vanished in a ball of superheated plasma as the main gun found its mark. The second cruiser's shields collapsed under a concentrated particle beam bombardment, leaving its hull exposed to a missile salvo that tore the ship apart from inside. The third cruiser managed to return fire, but its weapons struck nothing but empty space as the Indomitable demonstrated another surprise, maneuverability that no frigate should have possessed. Impossible. Admiral Zektar watched in horror as his advance guard was destroyed by a single ancient human vessel. That ship cannot generate that much firepower. Our sensors must be malfunctioning. But his sensors were working perfectly. What they were detecting was the result of 2 years of intensive human research and development, driven by the knowledge that they would eventually face exactly this scenario. The Indomitable was more than a modified frigate. She was proof of concept for technologies that would revolutionize space warfare. Admiral, his tactical officer, reported with barely controlled panic. The entire human fleet is beginning to move. They're all showing similar energy signatures. On the tactical display, every human ship was beginning to glow with the same impossible power readings. Ships that intelligence had classified as converted freighters were suddenly displaying the energy signatures of heavy cruisers. Vessels that appeared to be civilian transports were revealing weapon systems that belonged on dedicated warships. They've been playing us, Zektar realized with growing horror. Every ship in their fleet has been modified. Those aren't converted civilian vessels. They're purpose-built warships disguised as civilian craft. The revelation was staggering. The coalition had based their entire strategy on the assumption that they were facing a hastily assembled defense force equipped with obsolete weapons. Instead, they were confronting a fleet that had been designed specifically to fight coalition forces, equipped with technologies that had been developed through careful study of previous engagements. All fleets, Zektar commanded urgently. Implement Emergency Protocol 7. Assume maximum threat posture. Begin immediate bombardment of all human positions. But the coalition's response came too late. The humans had used their apparent weakness to lure the alien fleets into optimal engagement positions, and now the trap was sprung. Admiral Chun watched from his command center as the carefully orchestrated battle plan unfolded exactly as his strategists had predicted. The coalition fleets were spread across millions of cubic kilometers of space, confident in their overwhelming numerical superiority. They had arranged themselves in textbook formations that would have been devastatingly effective against any conventional opponent. Unfortunately for them, humanity had long since abandoned conventional warfare. Phase 2 is authorized, Chen announced to his command staff. Signal all defense platforms. Implement the Cascade Protocol. Throughout the solar system, The hidden installations that had revealed themselves began to demonstrate their true purpose. They weren't just weapons platforms. They were nodes in a vast network that had been designed to turn the entire solar system into a single massive weapon. The Cascade Protocol was perhaps humanity's most audacious military innovation. Instead of trying to match the Coalition ship for ship, human engineers had created a system that could coordinate the fire of hundreds of individual installations into concentrated barges that could overwhelm even the most advanced alien shields. The first demonstration came from the asteroid belt, where a cluster of mining platforms suddenly synchronized their particle weapons. Instead of firing independently, they combined their output through quantum field manipulation, creating a single beam with the power of a dreadnought's main gun. The target was a crystalline hegemony battleship that had been attempting to establish fire control over the asteroid field. The coordinated beam struck the alien vessel's shields with such intensity that the protective field collapsed instantly. The residual energy punched through the ship's crystal hull like it was made of glass, causing a cascade failure that split the massive vessel in half. By the void, Admiral Vexhai transmitted urgently to the Fleet Coordination Channel. They're using the entire solar system as a single weapons system. How is this possible? The answer lay in humanity's unique approach to space warfare. While other species had focused on building larger and more powerful individual ships, humans had concentrated on creating networks of smaller installations that could function as a single coordinated entity. The technology required quantum communication systems and processing power that pushed the boundaries of known science, but the results were undeniable. Captain Mitchell watched with satisfaction as the indomitable sensors tracked the destruction of Coalition vessels throughout the system. Her ship was only one small part of the larger battle, but she could see that the Lazarus Protocol was working exactly as planned. "Captain," her tactical officer reported, "we're receiving priority targeting data from the network. High-value targets are being designated for individual engagement." Mitchell studied the tactical display as new contacts appeared on her screen. The network had identified a cluster of Coalition command vessels that were attempting to coordinate the alien response to humanity's surprise tactics. Eliminating them would seriously disrupt enemy communications and possibly cause the collapse of entire fleet segments. "Acknowledged," Mitchell replied. "Plot an intercept course. We're going hunting." The Indomitable began to accelerate toward her new targets, her ancient hull cutting through space with a grace that belied her age. Around her, the rest of the human fleet was spreading throughout the solar system, each vessel moving to predetermined positions that would maximize the effectiveness of the defensive network. This was warfare as humanity had redesigned it. Not a clash between massive fleets, but a carefully orchestrated dance where every element worked together to achieve objectives that would have been impossible for individual units operating alone. Admiral Zektar was beginning to understand the magnitude of the trap his forces had flown into. The humans hadn't just prepared defenses. They had transformed their entire solar system into a killing field designed specifically to counter Coalition tactics. "Casualties?" he demanded. 17 ships destroyed, 43 damaged, his tactical officer reported. "And the battle has barely begun, Admiral. At this rate of attrition." "I know," Zektar replied grimly. "Signal all fleets. Implement Protocol Omega. Full dispersal. Maximum aggression. If we're going to take losses, we'll make them pay for every ship." Protocol Omega was the Coalition's response to unexpected tactical situations. Instead of maintaining formation discipline, individual fleets would scatter and attack targets of opportunity, hoping to overwhelm enemy defenses through sheer numbers and unpredictability. It was a sound strategy against conventional opponents. Against humanity's integrated defense network, it was exactly what the human planners had hoped for. "They're dispersing," Admiral Chun observed as the tactical display showed Coalition fleets breaking formation and spreading throughout the system. "Signal all stations. Implement Hunter-Killer Protocol. We're switching to Phase 3. The Hunter-Killer Protocol represented the final evolution of humanity's defensive strategy. As coalition forces scattered, the human network would track and eliminate them systematically, using superior coordination and tactical mobility to defeat numerically superior forces in detail. It was a strategy that could only work if the defending force possessed better information, superior coordination, and the technological capability to engage multiple targets simultaneously while maintaining tactical cohesion. Humanity possessed all three advantages. The battle was about to enter its most deadly phase, and the coalition was beginning to realize that they might have made a terrible mistake in coming to Seoul. 6 hours into the battle, Admiral Zektar stood in the ruins of what had been the coalition's most powerful fleet. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows across his command bridge as damage control teams worked frantically to repair critical systems. Around him, the survivors of his command staff coordinated what remained of the greatest military force in galactic history. Status report, Zektar commanded, his voice hoarse from hours of desperate orders. 237 ships destroyed, his tactical officer reported, his crystalline form flickering with barely contained stress patterns. 412 vessels damaged, 63 of those critically. We have lost contact with 47 fleet commanders and estimate that at least 20 complete squadrons have been eliminated. The numbers were staggering. In 6 hours of combat, the coalition had lost more ships than the previous 50 years of galactic pacification combined. And the humans showed no signs of slowing their relentless assault. How many human vessels have we destroyed? Zektar asked, though he already suspected the answer. 11 confirmed kills, Admiral. 14 probables. Their total losses appear to be less than 30 ships. Zektar closed his eyes, trying to process the magnitude of their failure. 500 battle fleets, the combined might of 47 species, was being systematically dismantled by a force barely 1% their size. Admiral, the communications officer interrupted urgently. We're receiving a priority transmission from Coalition Supreme Command. They're demanding a status update. Tell them, Zektar replied bitterly, that we have engaged the enemy and are suffering heavy casualties. Request immediate reinforcement and authorization to withdraw to minimum safe distance for reassessment. Sir, Coalition Command is asking for clarification on the nature of human defensive capabilities. They want to know how many ships we're actually facing. Zektar looked at the tactical display, where red icons representing human forces continued to move through space with deadly precision. The question was more complex than Command realized. Tell them we're not fighting ships, he said finally. We're fighting the entire solar system. The truth of that statement became clear as the battle progressed. Humanity's network-based defense strategy had evolved beyond anything the Coalition had encountered. Individual human ships operated as mobile command nodes, directing the fire of dozens of hidden installations while simultaneously engaging multiple targets. The static defensive platforms weren't just weapons emplacements. They were processing centers that could coordinate attacks across millions of cubic kilometers of space with millisecond precision. Captain Mitchell watched from the Indomitable's bridge as her ship's targeting system painted enemy contacts throughout her sector. Her vessel had become the focal point for a web of defensive installations that stretched from the asteroid belt to the outer moons of Jupiter. Every sensor, every weapon, every communication relay in the network fed information to her tactical computers and responded to her commands. Target Package Delta 7 is moving into optimal engagement range, her weapons officer reported. 17 coalition vessels, mixed configuration, attempting to establish fire control over the inter-system shipping lanes. Network response. Mitchell asked, 43 installations have acquired targeting locks. Coordinated strike available on your command. Mitchell studied the tactical data flowing across her displays. The coalition vessels were moving in a tight formation that would normally provide excellent mutual defense against conventional attacks. Against the network's coordinated firepower, their proximity would simply ensure that multiple ships could be eliminated simultaneously. Execute strike package, she commanded. Throughout the asteroid belt and surrounding space, dozens of hidden weapon systems fired as one. Particle beams, missile salvos, and exotic energy weapons converged on the coalition formation with perfect timing. The alien ships had less than 3 seconds to realize they were under attack before concentrated firepower equivalent to an entire battle fleet struck their position. The results were devastating. 17 ships vanished in a coordinated barrage that overwhelmed their shields and vaporized their hulls before they could respond. The attack had been planned, executed, and completed in less than 30 seconds. Strike package successful, the weapons officer reported with professional satisfaction. All targets eliminated. No return fire detected. This was how humanity was fighting the battle. Not ship against ship, but network against fleet. Individual coalition vessels found themselves facing coordinated attacks from dozens of sources they couldn't detect, track, or counter. It was like fighting an opponent who could see everything while remaining largely invisible. Admiral Chun watched the progress of the battle from his command center, tracking the systematic destruction of coalition forces with grim satisfaction. The network was performing even better than the most optimistic projections. Coalition casualties were mounting at an unsustainable rate, while human losses remained minimal. Current assessment? He asked his strategic coordinator. Coalition forces are in full retreat in 7 sectors, the coordinator reported. They're attempting to regroup around their remaining heavy command vessels, but network interdiction is preventing effective coordination. At current attrition rates, they'll lose operational effectiveness within 8 hours. Any signs they're adapting to our tactics? Some evidence of tactical modification in the outer rim sectors. They're attempting to jam our communication links and use electronic warfare to disrupt network coordination. Success has been limited. Chen nodded. He had expected the coalition to eventually figure out that humanity's advantage lay in superior coordination and information sharing. The question was whether they could adapt quickly enough to prevent complete defeat. Signal to all network nodes, Chen commanded. Prepare to implement Phase 4. If they want to fight an electronic war, we'll show them what human cyber capabilities can accomplish. Phase 4 of the Lazarus Protocol was perhaps humanity's most audacious innovation. Active cyber warfare conducted through the quantum communication links that connected the defensive network. Instead of simply coordinating attacks, the network could launch invasive programs designed to infiltrate and subvert coalition computer systems. It was a capability that no other species had developed, largely because it required a level of computational sophistication and aggressive programming that most civilized cultures found ethically questionable. Humanity had no such reservations. The first demonstration of Phase 4 came when a mechanic collective dreadnought attempted to establish electronic warfare dominance over a section of the asteroid belt. The massive vessel began broadcasting jamming signals and viral code packages designed to disrupt human communications and weapon systems. Instead of disrupting the network, the collective's electronic attack provided a direct pathway for human cyber warfare systems to infiltrate the dreadnought's computer core. Within minutes, the massive ship found its own systems turning against it as human programs seized control of navigation, weapons, and life support. Magnificent! Admiral Chen murmured as he watched the enemy dreadnought's weapons turn against its escort vessels. Sometimes the best way to capture enemy ships is to let them capture themselves. The cyber warfare capabilities demonstrated by Phase 4 had an effect beyond mere tactical advantage. For the first time, coalition forces began to question whether they understood their enemy at all. Captain Mitchell received a priority communication from Admiral Zektar himself, transmitted on standard diplomatic frequencies. Human vessel indomitable. Zektar's image appeared on her command screen. This is Admiral Zektar commanding Coalition Combined Fleet. I request parley under standard rules of military engagement. Mitchell studied the alien admiral's face, noting the signs of exhaustion and strain. Zektar's 4 arms hung loosely at his sides, and his posture suggested someone who had reached the end of his tactical options. "Admiral Zektar," Mitchell replied. "I am Captain Sarah Mitchell. What are your terms for parley? I propose a temporary ceasefire while we discuss the current tactical situation," Zektar said carefully. "I believe there may be misunderstandings that could be resolved through direct communication. I'm afraid that any ceasefire would need to be approved by Earth Command," Mitchell replied diplomatically. "However, I'm authorized to listen to any message you wish to transmit." Zektar was quiet for a moment, clearly struggling with what he wanted to say. When he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of someone who had finally understood the magnitude of his miscalculation. "Captain Mitchell, I have been a military officer for 47 standard years. I have commanded fleets in 17 different conflicts across 9-star systems. I have studied the military capabilities of dozens of species and developed tactics to counter every known form of space warfare." He paused, looking directly into the camera. "I have never encountered anything like what humanity has deployed here today." "We've had good teachers," Mitchell replied. "Every coalition expedition sent to our system has provided valuable lessons in how your forces operate. We've been studying your tactics for 2 years. But this goes beyond tactical innovation," Zektar continued. "Your species has developed an entirely new paradigm of warfare. You've created capabilities that challenge our fundamental understanding of how military conflicts are conducted." Mitchell nodded. "Admiral, with respect, that was always the point. You can't defeat an enemy by fighting the way they expect you to fight. You have to be willing to break the rules." "The rules exist for good reasons," Zektar replied. "They prevent conflicts from escalating beyond civilized bounds. They ensure that warfare remains a tool of policy rather than an instrument of total destruction. Those are very reasonable rules for reasonable species fighting reasonable wars," Mitchell said. "But this isn't a reasonable war, Admiral. This is a war of survival. You came here to commit genocide. You brought 500 fleets to exterminate every human being in this solar system. Did you really expect us to fight politely?" The accusation hung in the air between them. Zektar had no response because Mitchell was absolutely correct. The coalition had come to Sol with the explicit intention of eliminating humanity as a threat to galactic stability. They had planned to bombardment human worlds until nothing remained but radioactive debris. "What do you want from us?" Zektar asked finally. "We want to be left alone," Mitchell replied simply. "We want the coalition to acknowledge that humanity has the right to exist and develop according to our own nature. We want guarantees that there will be no further attempts to subjugate or eliminate our species. And if the coalition cannot provide such guarantees," Mitchell's expression hardened, "then we'll continue demonstrating why attacking humanity is a poor strategic choice." As if to emphasize her point, another coalition fleet segment disappeared from the tactical display as network forces eliminated 17 ships in a coordinated strike. "Admiral," Mitchell continued, "your forces have lost nearly half their effective strength in 6 hours. At the current rate of attrition, you'll have no operational capability remaining within 12 hours. You can continue this battle until every ship in your fleet is destroyed, or you can withdraw and report to your superiors that humanity is capable of defending itself." Zektar studied the tactical displays showing the systematic destruction of his forces. The numbers told a story that no military officer could ignore. The coalition's most powerful fleet was being dismantled by an enemy that seemed to grow stronger with each engagement. "I need time to consult with Coalition Command," Zektar said finally. "You have 1 hour," Mitchell replied. "After that, we resume full combat operations." The transmission ended, leaving Zektar alone with the remnants of his command staff. Around him, the bridge buzzed with activity as his officers attempted to coordinate the retreat of scattered fleet elements and assess the true extent of their losses. "Admiral," his communications officer reported, "Coalition Supreme Command is requesting an immediate strategic assessment. They want to know if additional reinforcements would be effective." Zektar looked at the tactical display one more time, studying the positions of human forces and the devastating effectiveness of their defensive network. The answer to Command's question was clear, though it would end his career and challenge the Coalition's fundamental assumptions about their military superiority. Signal Coalition Command, he ordered. Inform them that humanity possesses military capabilities that exceed our current understanding of warfare. Additional reinforcements would likely result in additional casualties without achieving tactical objectives. Recommend immediate strategic reassessment and consideration of diplomatic alternatives. He paused, knowing that his next words would echo through Coalition history. Tell them that we have encountered a species that fights wars we cannot win. In the depths of space, the ancient frigate Indomitable continued her patrol, her scarred hull bearing witness to humanity's refusal to surrender quietly to extinction. Behind her, Earth continued its orbit around the sun, protected by a defensive network that had turned an entire solar system into humanity's weapon. The galaxy would never be the same.